The disappointment of not making it after being drafted by Cincinnati, I made a mistake of running the 40. I was just coming off a track season during the draft, so I ran a 4.440. So when I got to camp, I outran everybody for the most part, with the exception of Isaac Curtis. And Paul Brown says, "Hey man, you got too much speed. We got to try you at wide receiver, coach. I've never played wide receiver." Well, they would run me to my heart content. We'll go over there with Isaac Curtis and Chip Myers and Ken Anderson was a quarterback, and they would just run me on the go patterns because I was outrunning everybody on the team. That didn't work out, but I would still have to compete against Chris Barr, who they drafted in the second round, Pat McAnally, Dave Green, and all of those guys who were resting during all of the course of practice. So it wasn't a fair fight, long story short. Disappointed. I got cut, came back to Jacksonville, but because of Sadie Gaither and those other coaches and teachers at Florida A&M, I graduated almost with a double major. And I taught high school history, and I coached a little bit, but I told the coaches and the kids, hey, I'm going to give this one more shot, this National Football League. So I worked my behind off, and I practiced. I remember those encouraging words from my parents, from coaches, from Gus Williams. Come on, go for it, man. One more. And I got an opportunity to go to camp with the Cleveland Browns. And Forrest Gregg was the new head coach for Cleveland. And I ran the 40 again. And he said, "Wow, you got a lot of speed." I said, "Coach, if you're going to put me at another position, just cut me now. Let me go because," and I explained to him what happened in Cincinnati. He said, "No, if you can do this, you'll just be the fastest punter in the National Football League." I said, "Okay." He said, "Can you handle this?" "Coach, all I need is an opportunity." Because the previous year, the Browns drafted a kid by the name of Tom Skladany out of Ohio State, second round pick. Skladany did not want to punt in Cleveland, the mistake by the lake. He wanted to punt in Detroit that had a dome stadium. So there was this ongoing battle between the owner, Art Modell, and the agents of Tom Skladany. And we're getting close to near the last preseason game, and Forrest Gregg said, "Greg Coleman, looked me straight in the eye. He said, 'Can you handle this?' I said, 'Coach, I can handle this.' He said, 'Okay, you're going to be my punter. To hell with Tom Skladany.'" And Forrest Gregg gave me an opportunity to punt for the Cleveland Browns as a rookie. Now, that didn't set well with Art Modell. So at the end of the season, Forrest was let go. As a result, Sam Rutigliano comes in as a new coach. I say, "Sam, why don't you let me go now? I know how this is going to work." No. The best man is going to get the job. Well, Art Modell goes back into the draft and drafts a quarterback punter, kid by the name of Johnny Evans out of North Carolina State. Well, that preseason, I led the league. 48.9 yards a clip. Johnny Evans couldn't hold my helmet. I know this is a family show, so I'll keep it that way. Long story short, the Friday before the first regular season game, I get a call from the Browns. They said, "Greg, Sam wants to see you," and he says, "Bring your playbook." I said, "Well, hell, I'm a punter. I don't have a playbook." I said, and I go in and I said, "Sam, I told you this was going to happen. I told you to let me go." I said, "Greg, it was out of my hand." I said, "Well, Sam, it was out of your hands when Art Modell went back and drafted Johnny Evans. It wasn't Johnny's fault." He said, because I said, "Sam, I believed you. I believed you." He said, "Greg, I'm not worried. You'll get another shot in the National Football League." I knew that, but I'd wasted some time. Wasted part of the journey, as I thought that it was wasted journey, but it wasn't. God was just preparing me. I tried out with 3 or 4 other different teams: Buffalo, New England, San Diego, and Philadelphia. We were still living in Cleveland. My wife, we were expecting our first child. We were still living in Cleveland. And it was week 7 in the National Football League. And I remember watching a game between the Los Angeles Rams and the Minnesota Vikings. Now, if you go back and Google, that game in 1977 was a game, no, 1978, that Jack Youngblood picked up Tommy Kramer, slammed him on his head, and he was concussed. He had a concussion out in the middle of the field. He was convulsions and all that kind of stuff. I go to my ninth floor apartment window, and I'm screaming at God. I say, you lied to me. You said if I was faithful, if I prayed, if I did all of the things, read my word, that you would give me the desires of my heart. I said, man, where are you? I just want to play football. And I'll even play football for the Minnesota Vikings. And I closed that ninth floor apartment window. The next day I was going on an interview because money was getting short with a bank where I was going to start a job. And I get home and my wife says, do you remember what you said yesterday? That you'll even play for the Minnesota Vikings? She said, well, some guy from Minnesota by the name of Frank Gilliam called here and they want you on a plane. They want you to come to Minnesota by Wednesday. God has a funny sense of humor. Now, the backdrop to that, when we were shorties back in Jacksonville, some of the guys loved the purple people eaters. Well, I never wanted to play for Minnesota because every time you saw them, it was under the frozen tundra of Metropolitan Stadium in Bloomington, Minnesota. It was cold. Second reason, they wore black shoes. Now, you got to remember back in the, all of the cool brothers, all the cool players were wearing white shoes. Joe Willie Namath, Billy White Shoes Johnson, Elmore Wright. And the third thing was they had a coach by the name of Bud Grant with piercing blue eyes that had his arms folded, walking up and down the sideline, that didn't say much to anybody. Those were three factors that I said that I would never, ever, ever play for the Minnesota Vikings. Thus, taking me back, be careful about what comes out of your mouth. Because as a child, I said I never wanted to play for the Minnesota Vikings. And it wasn't until I went to that ninth floor apartment window and humbled myself and said, God, I'll even play for the Minnesota Vikings. The next day I got a call. And I spent the next 10 years as a punter for the Minnesota Vikings.